I think one thing I've been really good at in my life is actually just applying things, like where the rubber meets the road, where there's an inspired action needed to be taken. That philosophy is not just philosophy, because if it's just philosophy, it's just mental masturbation, right? It's like we can get so caught up in the analytical aspects of things and technique, and we can pull things apart, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but at the same time, there has to be a point where there's the rites of passage. There's the taking the step. There's the movement of energy. Inertia, momentum. We've got to get things going, and one of the biggest sufferings I had, really looking back, was in.
Well, welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and seafood, Taoist Master San Qing, and I've been waiting quite a while for this, and I've been anticipating an extraordinary conversation with this incredible being that I invited on the podcast. He's a wisdom teacher, a seeker. He's very humble. He's transformed his own life. He's transforming others on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, constantly expanding. I want to welcome to the podcast, Guy Lawerence. How are you, my dear friend?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me on the show. And it certainly has been a long time coming, and I look forward to see what comes out of the conversation for the next hour.
Well, first we've got to throw a couple of shrimp on the barbie, mate. Are you from Sydney, Australia? Well, I've had roots. I've laid roots down in that place actually since I was born, and I transformed myself and jumped over the lake to Viva Las Vegas, baby. And so I've been here for about 30 years.
Yeah, wow. I actually, I'm from Wales originally, but I arrived in Sydney when I was 20, backpacking, and then from there, I did travel and spent my 20s traveling, and then settled in Sydney for a long time. At the age of 30, but now I live in northern New South Wales at the moment, which is a beautiful, beautiful part of the world.
Oh, where right on the border of Queensland, or?
I was, but now I've just moved south. I'm moving again, actually. We kind of
So you
change things up
probably,
again.
let me guess, you've been in the bowels. Like I'm an OG from Griffith, Leeton, Bathurst, Orange. I got that in my roots. We're rural up in here, baby. So
Wow.
I've seen quite a lot of, well, being a born Australian, I've seen a lot of Australia. And where are you? Where are you about now?
So I'm currently in Yamba, which
Hmm.
is a very small surf town, about 90 minutes south of Byron Bay, just to help people give geography. And then we're actually moving further south, about 3 hours further south, to Port Macquarie very shortly.
Very nice.
But Australia is amazing. It's a far cry from the valleys of Wales, where I grew up. But it's been very kind to me. There's been given me an opportunity in a life that I kind of have gone after in some respects, and the rewards have been unbelievable, and I'm forever grateful for the ocean, the sand, the lifestyle, what can present itself. That's here, really. Yeah, it's a pretty amazing place.
Wow. Wow. So why don't we get an abbreviated version for the audience of your origins and how you got here?
Oh my God. I mean, that could go in so many different directions, mate. Um, you know, I often share because I'm in front of people, probably 200 to 300 people every month now here in Australia, where we take the work out. Basically, presenting a path and another way into finding ourselves again. Life is can be pretty challenging. It can be pretty stressful, and that sometimes feels like there's no reprieve. And that was me growing up. I guess in the valleys of Wales, it was a very harsh environment. I grew up in a deep recession. All the coal mines had been shut down. Then Wales had always struggled. It's a very working class place, and the valleys is like all I did was play rugby and drink beer, really. They were the two things. And it was hard. Like it was really hard. I grew up in a council estate. It was rough. You know, I was in fights a lot. It was, you know, dog eat dog kind of thing in some respects, very tribal amongst the different valleys. But also, you know, that's one side of it, but also very kind, loving, embracing people, the Welsh are as well, you know, and there was a mix. So it kind of had this melting pot of everything. But from as far back as I could remember, I never really felt like I was fitting in. There was like, looking back now, my soul was pulling me forward into something different. But at the time, with growing up as a young man in my teens, I just had no mentors, no people to show me what was actually happening, you know. And I'm sure I see it in teens today, and the generation that's coming through. You're just like, oh, you just want to be able to guide people a little bit and show the potential. Going off topic a little bit, Sam, for a second. Just, you know, I just come back from Croatia. We ran a retreat to 60 participants. It was five-day retreat. And we had a 19-year-old kid, Jack, whose dad sent him from Australia, and another 21-year-old Ben, who came from Perth, to be there. And you had these two young lads amongst probably 70% women, you know, in the late 40s, 50s, that tend to gravitate to work. And we had some men there too. And to see the impact of what these things that we talk about and this work that we do can have on young men if they're open to it. And it's like, wow. You kind of look back in hindsight and say, I wish I had that when I was that age. But, you know, we wouldn't become who we are today without the struggles and the trials and tribulations of life, right? So it's wonderful to see. So I never had that at that age. And I just felt like I was getting more and more trapped inside. Like at 18, 19, there was a part of me actually screaming for help. And I didn't know where to go, who to turn to, what to do, because it was always literally, you be fine, mate. You're lucky you got an apprenticeship in a recession, because I was learning plumbing. You got your rugby, you got your beer, you got your girlfriend. Just stop complaining, get on with it. Yet, you know, everything was just building. And by the time I was 20, I finished my apprenticeship, and I basically quit everything in a week. My job, which everyone thought I was crazy doing, my rugby, which everyone thought I was crazy doing, and my girlfriend who wanted to get engaged, and at the time, and I felt like I was going to explode, so I just left out of sheer frustration and went to London, and then that actually started probably another 15-year road of trying to find myself in what's my purpose, what's my life. And I kind of remained outside the system ever since, really, you know, which at the time I thought it was my greatest curse. And I actually realized it was my greatest blessing. And once I rewired that, I really started to completely lean my life into a different trajectory. Once I understand in the power of meditation, the power of self, then started leaning into more about body awareness and trauma and how these are actually influencing the way you think, the way you feel. I lent into nutrition and fitness a lot, and how the gut microbiome and how things can affect your mood. And, you know, we're such incredible human beings, and the vastness of our potential is phenomenal. We just need to be helped, guided where to look, what to do. That's individual for each of us. And then from there, we can allow ourselves to truly blossom. So it's been a long journey, mate. And, you know, I'm sure we can get into lots of things of why I do what I do today or what happened along the way. But that was the catalyst for me to really start to want to.
Well, you know, I think when you went walkabout, it was in a time in history where there was a culture, a backpacking culture where you come of age, you finish your education wherever it is, and instead of going to university or anything else, you just get out of here. That was an Australian sort of basic rite of passage. The second you finish high school, go off and explore Europe or go off and explore the world. And I think that was a really powerful way to start your journey as you were leaning into your late teens. You said that you went off backpacking. That was necessary for your own self-realization. What do you think?
Yeah, 1000% it was, but on reflection, sadly, where I was at the time, because I never liked school. I didn't understand it. It was really interesting. I wasn't like a dumb kid or anything. I just couldn't. I just rejected the system, and by the time I was 16, those periods back home was going into GCSEs. So between the age of 14 and 16, I actually had more days off school than I turned up. And I was just, like a leaf blowing in the wind, just jumping in and out and, doing all sorts of things to avoid it, and actually never passed an exam. Right. And that was just through sheer rebellion in some ways. But the point being is that when I went traveling, I was sadly, it wasn't for the exploration, it was because I was running away. I was running away from a pain. And I knew the whole time, no matter how I distracted myself, that this underlying current was always with me and I couldn't shake it. So no matter how much I lived in the fantasy of my head of going to Nepal trekking or going to Cambodia or Laos, which we do, and Thailand, Australia, having these different experiences, that never really left me. It was always there, and that bothered me a lot at the time, really. Oh, don't get me wrong, I loved it. And you have to learn on your feet. I remember getting pickpocketed in Bangkok and having like my wallet, my card, my ID, everything was gone. It's like, what do you do, right? There's all these different circumstances you find yourself in, which you grow from immensely. And I wouldn't take back any of it, but that underlying theme for me was I'm running from a pain that I didn't understand, really. Which yeah.
Well, so the trauma led you. You said you were sort of looking and seeking for probably about 15 years after that. So tell us more about your first indication that you're on the right track. Your Sherlock to your Watson. What crumbs did you develop, my dear boy?
Yeah, well, interestingly, it was first around. I started dropping into. So I ended up working in the fitness industry, and I worked at Sydney University. They have a fantastic facility there. It's because it's my background in rugby. Like I was like sport, fitness, that kind of thing, and at the same time, I was stock trading, trying to make money on the side, thinking I'm going to make lots of money and then go and do what I love, right? So I was living this double life. And then amongst that, I was listening to Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle. There was all these cats, these great guys that I was articulating because I bought a book way back in 2003 or 4. It was called What I Didn't Learn at School But Wish I Had. And it was about wealth creation. Because at my time, my mindset was like, well, if I can make money, then surely it's going to relieve some of my pain. And then I can then do what I love, right? Which is horseshit, by the way. But at the time, I believed it. And on the back of the book was a list of recommended reading. And there was like 20 books on there. And I would say 75% of those books lent into spirituality, which was really interesting. And that really started to make me reflect, well, what are these guys knowing or doing when it comes to this whole wealth creation being? And my definition of wealth has completely radically changed over now it's my 50th the other day. Like my life is completely flipped on its head. But anyway, so I started listening to, and I had a CD player. Remember those things, man? And I'd go wandering off and I'd be listening to these guys and starting to explore this kind of element of even surrendering and trusting, because I always felt there was something that was binding the universe together, that there was a co-creative relationship happening, but I just couldn't articulate or understand it. And then these guys are really talking about it and the act of the present moment and being there. And I used to cycle. I don't know how well you know Sydney, but I used to cycle from Coogee because I lived in South Coogee and then Maroubra. And I,
Representing.
yeah,
I used to drive past Mel Gibson's house off the cliff there,
yeah,
and he'd be out doing stuff, and you know, my mother would be like, "Oh my goodness, it's Mel Gibson," and then he'd just stare at you all the way down the street.
yeah.
Yeah, you got old
It's
fashioned.
funny. Yeah, you see him kicking around. It's like you see Chris Hemsworth kicking around up here, you know. But back to so, and I would cycle from Coogee into the city every single day, and that was my therapy. Just being on the bike, it was just me, and hail, rain or shine, summer or winter, I was on my push bike, cycling the hills, coming out and going in and going to work, and then listening to these guys, and it was kind of percolating away. Like my reality was starting to shift, and I ended up on this journey working with people with cancer through weight training programs. And that really
Mm.
started to dial into nutrition because there was a charity that, and I was just drawn to it. I think looking back now, in my soul, heart and soul, I just want to help people, help themselves, right? Not just give it out to them and just say, here's the answer. But when people are ready and they're ready to help themselves, I can be of support or somehow. And it was like that. It was innate in me. It was just part of my makeup and nature. And I was fascinated, and I didn't know anyone that had had cancer. I was just drawn to these learnings at the time, and it was quite phenomenal what was happening, and it really highlighted, I guess, the bigger systems that are in place. Without getting into, yeah, these are definitely not my strong topics of conversation. But when you start to look at the bigger infrastructures and systems in place, the financial, the medical, the technological, the governments, it's fascinating. These big beasts of systems, and it was very clear that the medical system was symptom driven. It's great if you got acute pain or you break your arm and they can repair it straight away. But if there's chronic disease, it's a different story. Like, it's like, well, what's at the root of that? Why is the body not behaving at its potential? They just treat the symptoms, right? And then there's these guys talking about actually the power of food and the power of lifestyle and the power of mindset and the power of exercise and the power of meditation, and looking at the body as a holistic being, that everything is interrelated, just like we are with the universe. But our connection is so clouded sometimes we even forget, right? So that really started to highlight things in my life, and I really started looking at the way I ate differently again, even though I'd been taught in the fitness industry, right? This was radically different. And I was leaning into the Wayne Dyer stuff and this sort of surrender, and this concept coming forward about, because what he was doing, he was highlighting, even in the fitness industry, how toxic it is, how fit people can be still really unhealthy, right? So I was not only learning the value of life by working with people that were fighting for their life, I was then learning about the value of my own life and how lucky I was to have my complete health. And then I started to switch my values around in terms of what true wealth is. And I realized, actually, I have everything here within me. I'm living, I'm breathing. And it really started to teach me to be grateful for everything I had. So I was starting to put into real time what I was listening to through all these guys, right? The Wayne Dyers of the world about gratitude, but it was actually starting to mirror up. And I really started to change my perception of how I saw myself, how the day went, and really started to lean into that space of presence. And then that started to open up creativity and ideas, because what I was seeing was that the especially the protein supplement in the fitness industry, that was shocking, that you wouldn't even give to somebody with cancer, was like there was no natural proteins on the market. You couldn't get them. I know this is crazy to think about this today, right? So this was back in like 2007, 2008. And I read this book called The 4 Hour Work Week with Tim Ferriss, and it was talking about putting your ideas into concepts. So I was marrying the stuff I was listening to Wayne and Deepak and that, and I was listening to the entrepreneurial stuff with like Tim Ferriss, and this idea came about putting out there a natural protein supplement. And I had no business skills. I had no business even trying it. But I thought, if these guys can say surrender into, lean into what your heart's pulling forward, let's see what happens. So bit by bit, I actually started to look through the lens of gratitude, look through the lens of how I could serve and help others, and make a difference in life. That was my honest, true intent. And over the first year, 18 months, then things started to happen, started to build a relationship with the manufacturer and distribution. And the next thing, it started snowballing, and I ended up with a business partner who had completely different skills to me. And then we launched this company called 180 Nutrition in 2010 from the uni. And I had proof of concept because I was selling it at the university. And within 3.5 years, it became a multi-million-dollar company. So going from cycling every day, wondering how I'm going to get to the end of the week, eating my meals, listening to these, trying to stock trade the market, trying to live double life, I actually went 360 and started leaning into
The passion.
a passion and a heart-centered concept that was already innate in me. And it was unbelievable. But what happened, San, was that I'd got to this stage where I realized that there was much more than I'm actually thinking in the mind, because I was able to go out. I bought a Ducati, as you do.
Why not? Of course.
Of course, right? I ended up living in a nice little beach pad studio in Maroubra overlooking the ocean. It was like only a couple of years old.
Why not
And
Double Bay? Why? Come on. Why did you move to Double Bay? Come on now. Come on,
Yeah,
Guy.
no, I wasn't quite at the Double Bay lifestyle yet. But the point I'm making is that these things are there, but that underlying feeling, that current that was there was still there, really, at the end of the day. And even though I was starting to think, oh shit, I'm the man here, this is good, every time I put my head in the pillow at night, it would still be the same. So it's like I'd learned, I'd grown from all these experiences, and I think I was getting the lessons. But then it was almost like my soul is continuing to push me forward and say, right, you've done this little bit of your apprenticeship, great, but don't get sucked into the illusion, because really now you can start to experience what deeper sense of healing means to you. And now we got to move forward again. And it was nagging me away. And then one of my good friends reached out to me, Joe. We used to live together in London a very long time ago. We'd gone hiking through Peru together as well, and different elements. But he reached out, and because there were three of us, and he said, are you familiar with ayahuasca? And I was like, never heard of it. And he's like, oh, it's the most powerful psychedelic on the planet. Our friend Mike, who was another good friend of ours, is struggling a bit. He said, I've been leaning into doing some ceremonies. I'm encouraging him to go along. Do you want to come? And it was really interesting because I was terrified of doing it. I had to fly to Europe. I was going there anyway, so I was going to catch up because I was living in Australia. They were still in England. Because I'd had a traumatic experience with psychedelics as like a 13, 14-year-old, hanging out with older kids, being in the wrong crowd at the wrong time, and had this huge traumatic experience from taking magic mushrooms, because they just grow like on the hills of Wales, mate. They're just popping up everywhere. And I ended up hiding in an abandoned house in a cellar as a 13, 14-year-old kid, taking all these mushrooms, just waiting for this thing to wear off. And I had to really self-regulate myself while that process was going on. The positive that came out of that, I never really touched the drug or anything enhancing again. I was like, well, that's just ridiculous. So anyway, coming coming back to the journey of this, then I was really drawn. There was a part of me that which I always listen to this day, is that I need to do that. But at the same time, I'm like, I am terrified of doing that because it was bringing up all the trauma that I hadn't dealt with, or from the initial experience as a kid. And I decided to do it, and I treated it very respectfully, you know, because they would email you and they would send out different things, like how to best prepare, and I followed it to the letter, son, like everything. And really, like from a month out, I was really starting to eliminate. It was really what was fascinating looking back now, which I see all the time when people even come to our retreats. The moment you make a decision and you know you're all in, then it's like everything is starting to shift and support that for you. So in other words, everything that wasn't serving me, or things I knew I should address or do, were really starting to come up to the surface in that month prior to it. And I actually felt like I was falling apart, having a complete breakdown. you know?
You know, I mean, you're adjusting to the frequency. I mean, I think New Age mumbo jumbo would be you're merging into a dark night of the soul.
Yes. Yeah, another one. I think I had my first one when I was in my teens, mate, really. But yeah, totally. I know there's been a few points along the way. So that one was happening, and I could feel myself scrambling, but I had enough awareness around me to hold space for myself while it was going on this time. You know, where I think a few years prior to that, I would have just distracted myself and not dealt with what was wanting to present itself, right? You know, I'd learned enough by then to realize, no, this needs to happen. And I went and did the experience. I actually thought I was going to pass out before even taking it. My body was convulsing through the fear that was happening. And I remember drinking the ayahuasca and thinking, okay, I'm in now. I'm fully in. Again, you're 100% in. And I laid back, and it was the first time it's in that moment is when I really understood surrender, like truly understood what it meant to let go, because there was no way out. I was committed, and I remember creating a mantra to the universe, going, "Okay, I'm all in. As you know, I trust you. I trust you. I trust you. I trust you." And I just let myself drift off. I opened all my hands, my palms. I tried to soften my body as much as I could, and just felt the fear going through my body as opposed to being it, if that makes sense. And had at that point one of the most profound experiences of my life. You know, I went astral. I got shown different aspects of the universe. Mother ayahuasca had come in. I had different interesting visions as well, of like being wrapped up in snakes that were coming around. It was kind of crazy, and they all have different messages. But I remember coming out of that almost shown like, here's a little bit of your potential. Here's why you've been through what you've been through so far. There's something much greater in motion here, and continue to lean in and trust, and you will be okay. You know, follow your bliss, follow your passion, follow your heart. And I came out of that, and I've never done one since. I've never felt the need to, but it was a real kind of catalyst, that as part of that my personal journey to go on. And you know, I've had dozens of experience since that have been more profound without even any psychedelic enhancements, which is kind of staggers my mind too. And I think that's where my passion comes from. But then what that did was start to accelerate I guess, my potential in terms of impact or what I want to do. And it really sat with me. And then I really started heavily leaning into trying to learn more about the body. I started meditating through the chakras every day. And I didn't even know why I was doing it, mate. It was just like, no, I need to do this. It's like I'm getting these hits, and I would sit there every single morning, 6 a.m. I'd be going through my feeling into the awareness of my body, feeling into the areas around my body, and just connecting. And then the layers really started to want to move, started to want to come, and about, I think about a year later, then I started to feel energy go through my spine. Things were starting to want to come up. And there was one point in time when this energy just shot up from my base energy center and opened up my pineal gland, threw me off my chair. I was like almost all my muscles were convulsing because there was so much energy flowing through it. And it was interesting because I was able to hold that space for myself because of the experiences I had had prior, and got to that point and could feel the continuing, this unwinding, if you like, of, I don't know, things that the body tends to hold or store that are not necessarily yours. So it's like there's this opportunity to really find your true self more and more as you polish the coal to get to the diamond. And as those experiences started happening, which we can go into if you want in a bit, but then it got to the point where I realized my company and my business relationship, and that was starting to break down and fall apart. And this time I was very aware, because in the past I was ignoring those signs when I was younger. I had to get run over on my push bike and things to have a wake up call, where this time it's like, okay, I realize now I have to move in this direction. I'm having these experiences for a reason. I've been on the life journey that I've been so far for a reason. And I know with the skills I've learned from my company, through the supplement company, and through life's experiences, that I have enough here that I know I can help someone else that is feeling off kilter, off track. And how can I do that? And I felt like it just needed a real sense of just being authenticity, just being yourself, almost just being able to share your own journey, so people can just learn from that directly, so they can find their own guru, their own wisdom within, right? Because we tend to lean on people for them giving you, take away my pain, give me the answers, and give our power away. And it's like, just, and it's like, could this be how simple it is really, in terms of helping people help themselves, and understanding a compassionate side of things, of what you've been through as a human being, that it's okay, it's very normal actually, and be able to normalize these conversations and these experiences and things, and actually help people kind of ponder on what actually really matters in life. What is the depths of peace, love, and joy and happiness that we can actually experience these emotions on a regular basis, you know?
I mean, amen to that, brother. I mean, it's really an interesting thing looking at the cycle of human history, and everything goes in spirituality, atheism, religion, and we're in this sort of like pinnacle moment of self-realization and know thyself, which is truly the core messaging of a Taoist path. In essence, that's really what it means, is to your path, your way is the only way. The absolute truth is whatever you have created. Anyone that gives you an absolute truth, you about face and run in the other direction, because that's for you to decide what that foundation looks like, rather than someone else dictating what it's perceived as, which tends to be a misdirection for many people these days. I think they get caught up in whatever he has, I want it. And this can be a deficiency of, I think the most potent component to psychonaut experience is the activation of the imagination. That if you had dormant the idea that you could not create anything in your mind, that is left behind once you go through one of these rites of passage, where you realize how tangible that state really is, and it's not a psychotic or localized sort of in your intellect, in your mind. Your mind is all things, and that's probably more commonly associated with something that would be a hermetic principle of mind is mental, everything is mental, the universe is mental. Within Taoism, that's kind of like we look at everything as through the lens of a bellows. Our reality is created from the bellows. That means that you are contracting and expanding at the same time. You're all things and nothing at the same time, and you regress and progress to a point of realizing that the sum of all things, the decipher that you use as the yin and yang, is the answer to everything. You lay that template down and you'll find it in this currency, this electromagnetism. So from a dualistic perspective, we look at this and we go, okay, if we were to maximize, just like how we're communing right now and the oscillating charges you get from our communication, we are now electric. We are now embodied with this same biofield, and we're experiencing it. And I think that's most important, is that visceral, kinesthetic, somatic response that you have. And it's beyond the thinking. I always remind people, but you're thinking, you're not knowing. If you're knowing, you're feeling. And that feeling becomes regulated through your own cultivation. As you said, you're moving back to, I need to move the energy through my chakras. I need to be familiar within Taoism. That's called the burn-in. You burn in the internal architecture within the body. It is as tangible as is the human flesh. And so you realize the immortality of yourself through the energetic potential.
Well, 1000%. I love what you just said, mate. Yeah. Because what it boils down, I think one thing I've been really good at in my life is actually just applying things, like where the rubber meets the road, where there's an inspired action needed to be taken. That philosophy is not just philosophy. Because if it's just philosophy, it's just mental masturbation, right? It's like we can get so caught up in the analytical aspects of things and technique, and we can pull things apart, which is great. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, there has to be a point where there's the rites of passage. There's the taking the step. There's the movement of energy, inertia, momentum. We've got to get things going, and one of the biggest sufferings I had, really looking back, was indecision. It was actually not making a choice. Even though I told myself I'm making choices through my travel and experiences in life, going through, I'm moving all the time, but I'm running from something that, until I made the choice to dive in and take a look and fully commit to that, that's when everything opens up. And I understand it can be scary and it can be challenging, and it's like, but what's the alternative? That's how I see it now. Like, unless we really get to know ourselves at a deep and intimate level, how can we really be our true selves for anyone else? How can we then, if we're not the best version of ourselves for others, then we tend to lay expectation on others to be a certain way to fulfill my needs. And that is what's, I don't know if you swear on this problem, but sometimes.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. No. But
let it rip, mate.
because that's what's the problem with the world, right? Like, at one aspect, we're all throwing stones at each other, pointing outward, when nobody is willing to start to look at what's going on within themselves. Why is that over there really triggering me in here? And the world is a smorgasbord of opportunity to heal ourselves and start to really look at what's going on within. And then as we do that, we can then start to contribute in a way that's going to support others we start to create new systems, new ideas, new imagination, new ways of being, that people just go, you know what, I'm sick of that. I just want a piece of that. And I'm just going to start letting that go instead of pushing up against it, fighting it, and throwing rocks at it, and doing all the things I can that's keeping me stuck in my own little shit bubble. I'm going to start just let it all go and start actually coming over here and resonating with what I want to see in the world. And if I can see that within myself and be that within myself, then that's going to ripple out even more. And it comes down to showing up for yourself, taking the time, making the commitments, and making those decisions that allow you to actually not fear a bit of discomfort and lean into growth. And from there, everything arises, I believe.
Well, I mean, you entered into your own rite of passage through the tactile, through the physical, and you literally ascended through natural order without being aware of it. You were merging into it. I mean, it's so funny you mentioned this because it was a very similar entry level for myself, but it was a very dramatic one because, I mean, there needs to be the in-body experience. This is a tuning fork, a barometer to your reality. And, you know, if we sort of dilute it down to a physics perspective, I like to sort of give people an express version of that, which is light to wave to matter to particle realized with your attention, intention, cutting from the cloth of perfection, the mother, the primordial mother. You reveal the distortion, which is the electromagnetism. You are now creating from that energy. And that energy is now has a vibration. That vibration is a frequency that is met by a resonance. And if you acquire it, oh, yes, it will be yours. Oh, yes. So that frequency, everything is frequential. And I think people tend to, they're not aware to that point. Emotions are the currency of this electromagnetism. They're the currency of this duality, is part of the human condition. And your mission, if you choose to accept it, Ethan Hawke, is to find the center point, the Vesica point of all things, which for a Taoist is the mother. So when you look closer in inquiry, in contemplation and curiosity, you find hope. From hope, there is basically a belief system that is developed. And finally, through experience, there is a knowing. So when you find that middle point, we call this the Wu Ji, between the breath in and the breath out. As you hold that breath, you accumulate, absorb the riches that refine it and condense it to start saturating the physical body with this substance that we call the primordial mother, which is a unified state, and it will be self-realized within the physical flesh. We call this chi packing. When you chi pack, you start to emerge and reveal the immortal self through the 50 trillion cells of potential, 0.07 millivolts of electric potential that is revealed to the seeker. And that's why cultivation is such a sexy thing for Taoists, because it's a realization. You get to validate, self-realize, and have a repeatable experience that is not a psychotic episode that's transitory.
I love what you just said there. Like, there's no way in the world I could articulate what you just said, right? Like you did, like it's incredible. But I'm sitting here nodding my head, going, "Yeah, I totally know what you're saying. I couldn't agree anymore, because I've had the embodied experience. Because in some weird way, I've gone and done it backwards. You know, where I've actually had the experiences, but yes and no, because I went through that those elements of suffering, you know, like that slow burning, just oh my God, to then being like shot out of a cannon, to having these unbelievably profound experiences, to then come back and go, okay, so that's what's possible. That's what they're talking about. If I pick up a book, go, haha, that's what they mean. You know, but until I had it, what you would have just said would have just gone whoosh, straight over my head. You know, it's just an interesting yeah, play
Well, it
dynamic.
has to be experiential. If you cannot validate it for yourself, if it cannot be repeated, then it's a fleeting moment of delusion, quite frankly, because you
Mm,
get stuck in the mind. You believe that the psychology is a profile to what your reality is, but in essence, the structure of society puts you in a place you're always separated. You never realize the power of the internal self by realizing that all is one, one is all.
yeah.
And that can only come from experience. That can only come from a repeatable, and this is where I always bring people's attention. There's a method to the madness. Methodology, a system where you can repeat this experience, puts you on a path of self-realization, and then you can hand that wisdom teaching to others and have them be expansive, be all-knowing, and then share those wisdom teachings with others rather than it. And the rite of passage within Taoism, we come to a point of no return where you detach and attach as the primordial mother. So your ability to switch and realize your personality is a facet of the diamond of perfection.
Mm.
And when you understand this through the method, through the tangibility of the energy potential, because that's the excitement of having these physical bodies, is that you can tune them up to experience all these things and register them. And so many people go, "Well, I'm astral projecting," and I think a very common thing right now is sleep paralysis is something that people talk a lot about. How I teach, what someone would consider Shen projection, astral projection, out of body experiences. I had this conversation with a dear friend of mine. You probably even interviewed him, Tom Campbell.
Oh yeah, I know Tom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So he's been an OG in the game. He's a sprite young fella at 80, and
Is he
he's
80
been.
now? Is he? Yeah.
Yeah, he's 80, 81. And I mean, I've been doing this 32 years. He's clocked in at 60. Consciously, it seems like I just started yesterday because I still have the same gratitude and appreciation I did the first
Mm,
time I witnessed what would be perceived as supernatural. I think that creates the Sherlock Tudor Watson. And for me, it was a whirlwind of. I went from physical bodybuilding and powerlifting to suddenly going into meditation. Like
yeah.
it was so obscure, it didn't make any sense.
And the thing is, what you say as well, like, yeah, because I had Tom on my podcast 3 times, I believe. Like, and he's always brought it back to love, interestingly as well. And like I've had dozens of out of body experiences, right? And I've had mystical experiences. I've had interdimensional connections. I've presence of beings turn up in my field, especially when I'm holding space. Angelic beings, right? It's just talking about that. Like even 5 years ago, would have just felt like I wouldn't be able to voice it, but people think you're crazy, right? Now, you can have all these experiences, which is great, and it has been a very educational for me. But what I've come to learn, or what I feel the overarching message has been for me, is right here, right now, is where it matters. In this moment, we have an opportunity to experience this earthly, heavenly plane right now. And this is the greatest gift that we could have. And if we can lean into making it richer, as opposed to chasing these experiences to run away from the shit that we're not dealing with, to run away from that relationship, because at the end of the day, we're all divine beings, and we can all begin to start to see beneath the veil of each mask of human beings and see and feel into what's under there, because there is a divine being in every single one of us, I believe. And we have this incredible opportunity to explore ourselves, to really enrichen our life, no matter how painful it may be or may seem. And I guess what I'm saying is that to really, for people to ponder on what it is that we have and let that in, let it in. And the experiences that we've just spoken about are all byproducts of living life now. Because ultimately it could be taken away from us at any given time. Who knows, right? And we might be looking back thinking, shit, I wish I'd done more with that life, you know? And
It,
for
it,
me, it's really important, really important.
well, I think it is a universal thing. I mean, Tom and I come to the same consensus, the same center point as do you. I mean, the path of a Taoist is from seeking to knowing, and that self-realization comes in that merging, that unification that can be present, that you are bringing into this material, so that you are now able to share that frequency, that resonance, that returns people to what we would consider within a human condition, empathy. And
Mm.
when you are able to merge with that, the real ascension of knowing for any seeker, it starts with the alchemy, which, if you water the word down, is, God and the dark arts relationship. What that really means is you are looking at the mother, which within a Taoist path is yin and yang. This is the creation of all things. The light is evidence of all colors, and the dark is the absorption of all colors. It has nothing to do with the ominous negative or positive that seems to be created from the human condition. Yet you will get transmuted versions of that depending upon your own path and journey. And there's nothing wrong with it. You have to realize, as you said, feel into what it is it's obstructing you from your complete 360 view of reality that comes with that unification, what we call the primordial mother. And so once you hold that resonance, because everything's frequential, you create what we call wu wei, effortless action, effortless effort. And once you hold that, it then becomes serendipitous, synchronistic. All
Mm.
of a sudden, your life is every expression of all these things. So it doesn't matter whether you're happy, sad, up and down, you will reset yourself to that resonance, that embodiment that is the empathy and ultimately the currency of that unification. The primordial mother is love. So you will become selfless, you will become in servitude to raise humanity's frequency, which is really the most beautiful realization, I personally think, for any seeker.
Totally. And that's so well put because that's where I feel I'm at. I'm like when I sold my company, I was terrified. Like my wife was behind me 100%. And I said, I really want to lean into running meditation workshops, right? So the first thing she said, well, that's great, but how are you going to make money from that? Right? But I trust you. You've done this with your company. I trust you. Like so, because there's like all the back end stuff that people don't see and all these things. And I had a year up my sleeve basically to be able to financially pay myself to the same lifestyle I was living before I would have to get a job. And I thought, right, if I'm going to go out there teaching people to fully surrender, to fully trust, to fully live from a place of heart as well as mind, then the only way I can do it is by doing it. And I've gone, that's it, I'm all in. And there's no turning back now. You burn the ships, make the decision, and you step into that. And then it was a case of the reason why I bring it up was like, am I able to hold that frequency? Or is my old conditioning going to almost like pull me back down into the old way of being or into that place? But I'd had enough experiences and known to go, no, I can do this. I'm ready. I've had enough reps in the gym now to know I can hold that resonance if I choose to. And as Lenin, I stepped in. I had a really good friend that had a really beautiful gymnasium of all, because all my connections were through gyms, not through yoga studios, which is really funny, right? So it's like I'm trying to take meditation into the fitness industry instead of where they do all doing it at the yogis. And he straight away he's like, yeah, you can have my space. We'll help you. And the next thing you know, I had 27 people turn up for this first workshop I ever did. And about for I made the commitment to do the workshop, and then all of a sudden I'm all in. So it's like, oh, okay, how am I going to structure this and teach this in a 3 hour workshop? How do I relay that across? But because I'd made the commitment to say yes and do it, and I knew it was right here, even though my head was screaming at me, "What are you doing? Can you do it?" You know, the critic. It's like, okay, how am I going to? Because I've already made the commitment. If it kind of then motivated me to buy a whiteboard and sit there and go, okay, and I was filming myself practicing. How did it sound? How did it look like? And you know, there's this level of initiation that comes with these decisions. And I think we all have that potential within us to do that and learn by being in that space, by intentionally pointing yourself in a direction, saying yes to it and saying, well, we will figure it out somehow. That's where all the growth and all the wisdom is, the journey, right? And then the next thing you know, that workshop led to another workshop, led to another workshop. And I ended up doing, I think, about 28 workshops in my first year in there. And I recorded a 4 week program. I was offering people, look, I can guide you through this 4 weeks. And then that stemmed into my first retreat. And then I partnered with 2 other people. I didn't know I was going to do any of this. I just said yes. Didn't know any of it. And now 6 years on, like I said, we just come back from, I ran a retreat in Bali this year. I ran 6 retreats, I think, this year, 5, 6. I think we did 28 workshops, 1 days. You know, we coach people online. It just keeps evolving, expanding. And that's the key of holding resonance and holding a space. And I continue to up level, I continue to evolve. It's a never ending journey, that co-creation together, and you just kind of run with it. And my wish is that more people could experience what that feels like, and it could be anything. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be what we are doing, Yeah.
Oh, well, I feel like a lot of people, a lot of students of mine are like, well, Jiffer, I want to learn all the sexy alchemy stuff, the levitating and the energy healing. I said, look, this is perfect. This is a rite of passage you're going to want to create. And once you regulate your energy, you are going to start to thrive with this resonance. And because you will turn everything into frequency. And, just as people pursue something as simplistic as the philosopher's stone, within the Taoist alchemy process, this is very much deeply related to being able to turn lead into gold, water into wine, transmute things that would be somewhat in an imaginary state or supernatural or superhuman or paranormal. This is the abilities that you start to master as something that will help someone else spark their curiosity. And that just happens on anyone's path. My only reservation for students that get lured into certain levels of ascension is they get stuck in I love that magical part where I can do telepathy or clairvoyance. And these are all just parts of you filling out and remembering who you are, returning to that true nature, that center point of realization where everything is whole. And you will know this because you will want for nothing. And all you will want to do is share and give and love, which is the ultimate currency. And that will be evident in your very thought, every feeling, every action. And it will not be questioned. And people are like, well, What do you mean? Because any time you are selfless and in servitude, you have no thought. You're not even thinking, not for a second. You help someone who is in need. You're not contemplating what is the best outcome for this. What will I receive if I do this? This is where within Taoism we call this: if you act in virtue, you have none. And so the virtue is a virtual signaling. In essence, there's so much in lack of that there's a need for, a validation, an approval that you're doing what you're doing. In a lot of cases, when I share something with someone, it's to help open their eyes to the possibilities, not for them to validate that I'm the next coming of Jesus or Moses or a healer. That doesn't bother me. And people are like, how do you access this stuff? Because it's now. I'm no place, no person, no thing. I'm not San Qing, the Taoist priest. I'm not some high-level channeling center point. You have to be this present moment without any title. And that's when you will access the true nature of all things. That unification will be present right now, and it will be undeniable, because that comes in the form of miracles, manifestation, magic. Magic is always such a great path for a Taoist. The alchemy is really a powerful way to really embrace your relationship with the universe, and furthermore transmute things. I mean, there are a lot of manifestation teachers these days that push on these things, but truly, just as our dear beloved rest in peace Bruce Lee would say back in the 70s, it's the flow, baby, which is Wu Wei. It really is that simple. It doesn't get any easier than that. And I mean, he mentioned that word consciousness just before he passed in his last interview, and the guy was looking at him like, what the hell is that? I mean, even today, on your journey, as long as you have been on this journey, that word is still a point of contention, even with philosophers, with physicists, with scientists. I know they're in the game of wanting to, I'm going to coin this. Maybe I could patent it. So that's just this little group of people that can access it. But truthfully, you and I know it's available to everyone.
1000%, mate. 1000%. I just because I know you mentioned off air about time and space and everything. I'll have to jump off the podcast in a moment, but I did one thing that might help listeners as well. That really helps me is what you just spoke to as well. Is about if I'm leaning into wanting to figure out the levitation or the intuitive aspects of things, or get all the answers and just have it here and now, it's exciting, it's real. I always lean into, well, why am I wanting that? Like, what part of me isn't feeling whole and complete? Because ultimately, if I'm a being that's being whole and complete, then I should want for nothing, and I'd be completely content from the inside out without needing outside validation to make me feel a certain way, right? So then that's hence the journey and the self-inquiry. So I've become much more aware of that these days. But it's like, why am I like, what is that shiny object out there? Why am I attracted to that? And is it something I need to address in here to explore that is now ready to present itself? Because I'm chasing something as opposed to being here and now in the moment.
I agree. It's a beautiful realization that everything is within you,
And
and it all starts.
yeah, and it's given me a huge sense of peace in my own journey, just looking at things from that perspective, and then questioning it. And look, don't get me wrong, it's great to go exploring, like you say, the mystical experiences and different things. I've certainly looked at that, but it's always comes back to what is going on here and now.
And through your wisdom teaching, you'll help people along their path of self-realization. And I'm very grateful to be reunited, and it feels so good. A bond that seems to be from past lives, and I'm very grateful I feel like I've just met an old friend, and we're just getting to know each other again. So I'm very grateful for you coming on the podcast today. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for all you do, San. Thank you.
All right, brother. I'm going to leave your social sphere interweb under this podcast. I want my disciple students, 126ers, and also subscribers to this channel to go out and explore Guy's incredible offerings and wisdom teachings to get you to have a deeper nature, a deeper understanding of reality, and become this very moment as now. And that can only come from the experience. That's why everyone that watches this channel loves the experience, because this is not just a conversation. We're experiencing an energy union that comes with this, and it's so powerful. That's why I love doing these. So one last question. What's your definition of spiritual consciousness?
Holy moly. Spiritual consciousness. Look, the only thing that's coming to mind right now is literally look through the lens of love, unconditional love.
That's beautiful. I've done hundreds of these podcasts. I've never got the same answer, as I should not, because that is your path, your journey, your realization. But I'm digging it. I'm digging it. So thank you so much, Guy, for being here. And I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. I am your humble servant and seafood Taoist Master San Qing, and I'll see you on the next one, guys.